Hello again, and welcome back to the Ostrichtechnique, the only podcast where you can bury yourself in psychedelic tea. I'm one of your hosts, Ananth.
And I'm your other host, Chris.
Chris, Happy New Year. How have you been? I mean, it's been a bit of a while, since we uploaded our last episode, but how were your holidays?
They were good. They're very merry and everything. How were yours?
Yeah, merry as well. Merry in the warm state of Florida. So, but excited to be back, excited for the new year, and excited for another round of Marvel podcasts. And this is, a pretty make or break year for Marvel overall, 2026.
Yeah, they got some big ones coming out, I would say, but
I mean, nothing bigger than an Avengers movie. So
yeah, we'll see how it does.
And I mean, truly, a lot is resting on this Avengers movie because Marvel is not in the state that it was when Infinity War and Endgame came out. They're in a much weaker position, arguably. So curious to see how all this lines up. I mean, we're obviously recording this post holidays, so we've now seen that there's been a lot of teasers for Avengers Endgame that were released with the Avatar as part of the trailers for Avatar. Chris, what did you think of those?
They didn't really give much away. I think it's really nice to see the cinematography and everything, but yeah. I'm really waiting to see a full length trailer.
Yeah, which I think all speculation points to full trailer coming out with the Super Bowl. So we will have to wait and see for that. But yeah, I would agree. These were very much like just little snippets just to, I think, remind people, hey, we're coming back with an Avengers movie. I'm curious to see how the reception to it's going to be, just because there's not a lot of characters I think that people are too invested in beyond the OGs, which is, I guess, why they started off with a trailer for Steve Rogers coming back. So I guess we'll see. But, we're not here for Avengers. We're here we're still working up to, Infinity War and Endgame. So we're here to first talk about Doctor Strange today. So, Chris, how are we feeling about Doctor Strange here?
Feeling pretty magical. What about you?
Yeah, this one's an interesting one too. I think this one is also not talked about a lot in the MCU, but equally important. And I think another, just a nice solid film that's just like very enjoyable. And it was a fun time to go back and revisit because this one has been a while, I think, since I've seen the original Doctor Strange.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not one that's necessarily talked about the most, and I know, probably because it's a good film. I wouldn't say it's the top tier, definitely not bottom tier, but it does fill that like niche role of, introducing the supernatural, like, where I guess, Ant-Man, which we watched recently, has also a niche role. So like a lot of those films I feel like aren't talked about as much because they aren't your typical like superhero movies. But this one was definitely a good watch, and it was good to, see it again after not seeing it for many years.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think this one is a great watch also. We'll definitely talk about this more as we go into the acts, but the world building, I think, is so solid in this world. The sort of visual language that they use for magic and the way that they set up all of these different things, like the sanctums and Kamar-Taj and like what they're fighting against, like all of the different dimensions and multiverses and all of that stuff. I think that was so properly and well done that, it really does sort of underset like everything else that happens in the MCU afterwards almost. Like we talk about it in terms of the upcoming Avengers movies. We talk about it obviously in Doctor Strange 2, but like this whole, it really does set a pretty solid foundation, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I know for us going into this movie the first time, I don't know if you remember this, Chris, but I think in like when was this? It was sometime in I think in high school. This was when this was in college when they did like a little sneak preview at like our home theater.
Yep.
And we got to go see like a clip of it in IMAX, and it was like a 20-minute clip or something, which I think just really goes to show how, the MCU is at its peak, that we were willing to go to see something for like 20 minutes just in IMAX just because.
I mean,
But it was a great scene. I mean, it is
yeah,
the scene which we will talk about.
I mean, like, I just don't know if Marvel has really done that very frequently, you know? So, I really wish they would bring that back, but like you said, this is peak Marvel, and they had the opportunity to do that, and, I kinda wish they were able to do that a little bit more, but, the state of the MCU right now is not at its highest, so
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that this movie in particular was one that was really trying to show off in terms of its visuals and its IMAX usage in particular. There's obviously been other movies and Marvel movies in the past that have taken advantage of IMAX, but I think from Doctor Strange on is where we really see Marvel's this, and I would say Civil War for the airport chase sequence or the airport fight sequence were really where Marvel cements its sort of relationship with IMAX and they start using it to greater effect as the movies go on. So I think at this point now, even on like Disney Plus, we get a lot of the the IMAX enhanced versions
Mhm.
of these movies now. So yeah. But yeah, I think let's just jump right into it, Chris. I guess before we start Act One or like the introduction, that is what I want to talk about, the Marvel intro. This is now the first movie in the MCU that gives us like the modern, like what we know today as the Marvel Studios sort of fanfare logo intro. What are your do you remember what you were thinking about it back like when we saw it back in what like 2016, 2017?
I
And like I guess your thoughts about it today?
I don't really remember what my thoughts about it were at the time. I'm sure I was, it definitely was something that caught my eye
Yeah.
because, it was brand new, but I do like it. I do like it a lot. It's a clever way to include just films from the entire franchise.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I really enjoy it. What about yourself?
Yeah, I know. I think for me when I first saw it, I thought it was a really cool way to sort of set you in the world of the MCU. It made you feel like you're part of something bigger, or like this movie's part of something bigger. That like they show like all of the different sort of heroes that are popping up there, and as it goes on in the future, they use this sort of opening fanfare to sort of set the stage that that like show some of the other occurrences of this character popping up. So like they'll do that a lot for like they did that for Black Panther when he shows up in 2018. They basically show like clips of him from, Civil War and stuff like that. And they do it to and they start changing the colors of it, they change the vibe of it. So I think that was really interesting. I think nowadays I find that it's a bit long in the tooth. And I know we discussed that like when we'd watch like the TV shows, like, okay, it's like a long intro for like a show that's like only whatever 20, 30 minutes or long or something like that. Which is why I'm happy they've shifted to like the Marvel television logo that they use now.
Hmm.
But for the TV show specifically. But I think for the movies is like it's fine. Like it appropriately sort of sets the stage like, hey, this is a Marvel movie, though doesn't I think conjure the same levels of hype and excitement that it used to. At least I don't know about you for these days.
I mean, yeah, I think just that's the general sentiment around Marvel. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll see this month how Brave New World fares, but yeah, cool. All right, I think with that, Chris, now we can roll into the intro. So why don't you give us the little spiel you got ready?
sure. Well, this is 2016's Doctor Strange. It's directed by Scott Derrickson, and little synopsis of it. It's while on a journey of physical and spiritual healing, a brilliant neurosurgeon is drawn into the world of the mystic arts. And it stars Benedict Cumberbatch as Dr. Stephen Strange, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Rachel McAdams, Tilda Swinton, and Benedict Wong. But
Yeah.
we'll get to the villain in a bit. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
don't want to call him out just yet.
Okay. Okay. I mean, yeah. I think commentary on Marvel's height of its powers at this point, that they're getting, really world-class actors to join in and as part of the MCU. Like Benedict Cumberbatch was like, someone with like a lot of Oscar prospects. I mean, he still has a lot of Oscar prospects. He's I think very selective with the roles that he picks, but I mean, him, Benedict Wong is usually in good movies. Tilda Swinton is almost always in very good movies. Rachel McAdams is a really great actress, and so is the villain, who for some reason you want to talk about a little bit later, but that's okay.
Well,
He's
I mean,
also
like it opens up with the mystery, like, oh, you don't really, the reveal of him, at the beginning of the film, but whatever.
yeah,
In
but
the spirit of the film, but
yeah.
we could talk about him.
No. I mean, we can. I mean, it does start off that way, but
Yeah.
So why don't you kick it off, Chris? I mean, we're going to talk about the villain in like the first scene right away. So I mean, what are some scenes that stood out to you in Act One?
I think just a lot of not to stray away from what we were talking about, but a lot of just the background scenes of just Steven in his prime as a doctor. And
Yeah.
you really get the sense, like him in the operating room and just basically just having a fun time when it's supposed to be very serious.
Yeah.
You could just tell how good he is at his job.
Yeah.
And the cockiness about him. Even though he has these coworkers, he still, in a very playful way, kind of belittles them.
Yeah.
And then I think that really, is apparent when he has to basically go and do an emergency operation to remove the bullet out of the patient's brain that they already pronounced dead.
Right.
And you can kind of tell he has that rivalry between Dr. West and himself. So
Right.
I think showing very early on how sort of arrogant and competitive, but also extremely competent Steven is as just as a neurosurgeon really lays the groundwork for his character and the evolution he will be going on of humility throughout the rest of the film.
For sure. I'm glad you brought up the intro, because I think for me, like what stood out for me is that the whole sort of first 20 minutes of the movie, it really is tight storytelling that gives you everything you need to know about Stephen Strange. Because in 20 minutes, you get that he's a cocky surgeon, that he's really good at what he does, so he has a right to be cocky in some way. He is very wealthy, and he's used his sort of role as a physician to drive him to great wealth, that he has some sort of relationship with Christine, and like he has his accident and stuff too, all in the first 20 minutes. So I think that it was just like really, really well done overall, just setting up Stephen Strange as like this sort of cocky and arrogant doctor. But like you said, he is clearly very skilled at it. So like it's not like it's unfounded. I mean, Marvel obviously like kind of they already have sort of the template there with Tony Stark. Like he is someone that's super cocky, but kind of has, he
He's
kind of has a
valid.
basis for it, because they're extremely skilled and intelligent and are capable at what they do. So I think it's almost a little bit of a magic trick, no pun intended, for this movie, that you are made to be sympathetic towards Doctor Strange, because I think by the end you are rooting for him. Maybe not as strongly as some of the other characters, but I think they do a really good job with selling you a story and making you invested in his character, even though he is kind of he's more abrasive than Tony Stark. Like there's always like a playfulness to Tony Stark's snark and sass, whereas this one there's like, I don't know, he was definitely a little bit more mean-spirited, Doctor Strange.
I agree. Yeah.
And even then you still buy into him by the end of the movie, or even after the first 20 minutes. I don't know, but I think they did that really effectively, for me at least. Yeah. I think for me, well, I'm going to jump in here with something that stood out to me in this, like, I guess in the first 20 minutes, and then I'll give you my real thing. But with the part where he's driving in the Lambo, I don't know if you picked this up, Chris, and maybe you did when you first saw it, and I'm just, stupid. But when he's talking about, like, give me some interesting cases to talk about, one of the ones he talks about was an Air Force person with a shattered spine in experimental armor. And I totally didn't realize this, but that's Rhodey. They're talking about Rhodey.
I don't think they are.
I think they are.
This
Like,
is occurring like way before Civil War. Like I'm pretty sure this occurs before Civil War in the timeline.
does it occur before Civil War? I don't know. It seems mighty convenient to be talking about an Air Force person in experimental armor with a shattered spine.
Well, I know. Well, I mean, I picked that up when the movie first came out, saw in theaters. But I know a lot of people, when the movie came out, were theorizing it was the Justin Hammer, person in Iron Man 2 when they're playing the videos in front of the court.
So you think that takes place in 2012?
Maybe not necessarily in 2012, maybe like soon after, but because Doctor Strange ends in the present day, which would align with Civil War, right? Because that's when Civil War came out. They both came out in 2016. And Strange spent years and years. I guess the beginning of the film is like a few years before the end of the film. So I don't think the timing lines up with Civil War, but I could be wrong.
I mean, I don't know, because I was looking this up because I was curious about this. So I think what Derrickson said was that Strange ends in like November of 2016. Like that's where modern sort of day is, and that's probably around when the movie came out. But that would probably mean that earlier, I don't know. I think it might work in my head. That's my head canon. But
well, I guess we could always like fact check it, because I know they came out with the like the book that had the official timeline.
Yeah. We can go back and take a look, and maybe we can follow up in the next episode with our listeners here. But yeah, that was something that I thought was interesting. What I will say is something else that stood out to me around this whole period of like 20 minutes or so was the really like nice small details that they put in about Strange's accident and how that was affecting him in just like little ways, which I really appreciated. Like the fact that he was growing out his beard because he couldn't properly shave. And the fact that he couldn't write his own name because of his tremors too, I thought was also a really nice little touch, just to show how like desperate and dire the situation was for him. And yeah, I really like that overall. So I sort of cheated. I gave two things, but I'll pop back to you, Chris. What are some other scenes that stood out to you in Act 1?
I would say the opening scene. So now we can get to it. So it's a mystery at the beginning, right? Where they, these hooded figures capture the librarian at Hermitage and behead him after stealing some pages from a book.
Yeah, surprisingly dark, by the way, that they literally show someone being beheaded.
Yes, in the opening scene.
Yeah.
And then, these figures escape and are chased by another hooded figure. And we get the reveal that the villain is Mads Mikkelsen, fantastic actor, who, I personally feel like was a little bit wasted in this film. But, from the get-go, we get the visuals, like the trippy visuals that, we would expect, that was marketed with, buildings kind of just turning in on each other and just everything corkscrewing and winding. And that's something that just hasn't been done in the MCU up to this point yet, with all of these really, really interesting CGI environments that, actually work, because it is, magical and supernatural, and it makes sense that they would have control over, matter or the shape that things are. So I think the display of that CGI and just that brief fight at the beginning really kind of gives you a taste of what's to come.
Yeah, definitely. I think that opening sequence it's a really nice sort of introduction to like the visual language of Doctor Strange's world, like the mystic arts and whatnot, where you get to see some of the, mind bending visual effects. And that's, I think, really what this movie really highlights in full force. I think how well their visual effects were done in this, which is a, far cry away from, I think, where some of their movies have ended up nowadays, where they feel rushed and, these visual effects artists don't have enough time to make these sorts of things. But the visual effects in this movie, I think, top to bottom, are really well done, especially all of the sequences in like mirror dimensions, like the opening sequence was. So just really, really engaging. And I mean, I don't think did you mention that we get to see the villain unhood himself in this fight, and he's played by Mads Mikkelsen. So he's and the fact that he is, I think I agree with what you said, that he was wasted in this role. And he's not the only character that's, I think, wasted in this movie. Chiwetel Ejiofor, I think, is the real sort of waste of a character. Someone who is an incredible actor and has been severely underutilized in.
Don't worry, we get a second chance of him in Doctor Strange 2, and then a third chance in Venom 3.
Oh my God. I forgot that he's in Venom 3. I mean, you've seen Venom 3. He's not, I've still not seen Venom 3. How many ever years later? He's not Mordo, right?
He is not, no.
Okay, yeah. So he's not Mordo. I mean, Venom 3, I think, was 100% a paycheck move for him, which is, that's valid. They're actors, you do a job. But yeah, the even Doctor Strange 2, he's like barely utilized in Doctor Strange 2, man. Like the thread that they set up, and I'll talk about this at the end, but like the post-credit scene from the wasted potential. It's yeah. Anyway, we'll talk about that when we get to it. But yeah, Mads Mikkelsen was a little bit underutilized in this role, considering how good of an actor he is. But great scene, though. I will say also in this sequence, and it's sort of a general, I think, criticism I have in this movie overall, is anytime they shoot in the cities. So like this one was shot in London, or when they run out of Comertage into London, and then even the scenes in like New York, like the way that they're shot is just like so like reflective of Marvel at the time, I think, where they're so gray and dull versus some of the ways that things are shot in Comertage or even inside the sanctums themselves, where the lighting is way more interesting and like warm. And yeah, I was not a fan of the way that some of the, like, I guess, cinematography was in the city scenes. But I don't know about you, Chris. Was that something that stood out to you at all?
No, I feel like that's something that stands out more to you generally than myself. So to me, it's not something that really caught my eye or really something I thought about, but it's an interesting point that you brought up.
Yeah. I think for me, I've been more sensitive to the gray, duller palette that Marvel was using in this time frame. So for me, just a bit of a shame, because those visual effects, like I said, were just so well done that it really does. I think it takes away from the really good work that those people were doing. So, yeah. I think I'll jump back here with maybe a scene that stood out to me was, I think, the whole introduction to Comertage, when he is in Kathmandu, when he is looking for Comertage. I don't know if those are sets or if they actually shot in Nepal. I think they did shoot some stuff in Nepal, if I remember correctly.
They did,
right?
Yeah, they were on set.
Yeah. So that stuff obviously looks really good. I wish the MCU would shoot more in real locations again. I understand probably why they don't, because they're leaked to the high heavens. But I do wish that they did more, shooting in person for some of the stuff, because it, I think, really adds a nice flavor to it. But then even the sets that they made of Comertage, like that first set when Steven walks in and meets the Ancient One, that sort of, I don't know, trapezoidal structure that they have with like the little holes in the wood and the light, was, I think, a really nicely made set. I think all of Comertage was like really well designed, and I really enjoyed looking at the sort of set design that they had set up there.
Yeah, it felt very in tune with the surrounding area, and I agree. I think it was very, very well done. It felt like it fit, and it just overall just fit the vibe of the location.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think that was something that really stood out to me, was just really well done. I think overall the set design between the Sanctum and Camertage
Hmm.
was just really, really, it really shows the good work that the folks at Marvel do when they put in set design.
Yep.
So yeah. Any other final thoughts here, Chris, on this act?
I would say I have one more, and I think you could probably agree is th- when Steven is being very arrogant towards the Ancient One when they meet for the first time.
Oh, duh, yes.
And, she's showing him different pictures of like acupuncture and just a ton of different spiritual books that you find in like gift shops and posters and whatnot. And the Ancient One explaining how that all these are just parts of a greater image and Strange thinks he knows like everything, and she literally opens his mind, touches the third eye and throws him through a huge like LSD trip.
Mhm.
And again, we see the visual effects are crazy.
Yes. Yeah,
And
this was that
yeah,
scene that we saw in IMAX, like as that
yes.
preview sequence, which was incredible. This is a scene that I thought was incredibly done,
And the
really, really well
colors
done.
too.
Yeah,
Oh my, yeah. So
yeah. I think before this, I think really the only movie that had something similar to this was probably Guardians, the first Guardians, like in terms of like just the wild colors.
yeah,
And I think every scene that was like in this sort of vibe, like where we got, them going through different dimensions or like the dark dimension and stuff like that, where the colors get really interesting and trippy and like the visuals get really trippy. This is, I think, where Doctor Strange really shines. And I think it could have used a lot more of that stuff.
yeah,
Um,
fair.
but yeah, this whole sequence was just super, super engaging. And I think is really what, you know, I think people are locked into the movie from this point.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But yeah,
no,
that's something I definitely want to point out before we
for
move
sure. No,
on.
that's a great call. Great call. I can't believe I did not bring that up. I'll just say that the last sequence that I'll talk about here is after Strange is brought into Kamartaj to start training, like his whole thing about how he just can't seem to surrender and let go to actually doing all of the various mystic arts that he's being asked to do, and then being literally dropped off at Everest. So it
Yeah.
becomes a matter of life and death. So, and I mean, I'm sure you picked this up too, but like the line that Mordo says, where he says "not again" to
Yeah, clearly it's happened in the
it's
past.
happened before, so now it just leaves in my mind how many folks have died from the Ancient One trying to do this
Yeah, yeah.
to people. Yeah, but I think that obviously that is really the turning point for Steven, where out of desperation or otherwise, he finally seems to click with the mystic arts, and that's where the the shift really is, and that's where the act really ends too. So, yeah. Anything else, Chris, to add here before we wrap up this act?
No, I think we're good to wrap it up.
All right, cool. So then I think now, because I mean, Stanley pops up a bit later, so it's time for trivia. And since I asked you questions last time, Chris, for Civil War, that means that I think I am up now.
Yes. All right. Are you ready, Ananth?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Question 1. The majority of which MCU films crew was unable to return to the sequel because they were committed to Doctor Strange?
Yeah.
So you have to tell me what that first film in whatever franchise it is was unable to return to the sequel film because they were
Committed to
tagged to
Doctor
Doctor Strange.
Strange. So
Yeah.
you're saying, so I want to make sure I'm understanding this properly. So there was a crew that worked on the the introduction film for some property in the MCU that
Correct.
wasn't able to return to its sequel because they were working on Doctor Strange.
Correct.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm just trying to think about what movies were coming out around this time. So, Civil War was around this time. It came out 2016. Doctor Strange came out in 2016. What, Guardians 2 came out in 2017? What else came out around then? I think that's really it, isn't it? Like, there's no. I mean, Spider-Man: Homecoming is 2018. Black Panther's 2018. I think Ragnarok was probably around. I think it was close to Doctor Strange because they obviously have the post-credit scene. I mean, I'm gonna guess it's either Ragnarok or Guardians, and then if I had to pick one, probably the closest one is Guardians. Is that? I'm gonna say Guardians.
That is correct.
Yes.
Yes. So James Gunn had revealed that most of the crew could not return for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 because they were working on Doctor Strange.
Mm.
All right. Well, question 2. Speaking of conflicts, Benedict Cumberbatch had commitments to which Shakespeare play that caused him to initially decline the role of Stephen Strange?
Which Shakespeare play? Oh my god. Chris, you know how many Shakespeare plays there are, right?
Oh, I know, but this is one of the more popular ones.
I feel like I do recall this vaguely. Was this Macbeth that he was tied to?
It was not. It was Hamlet.
That was my second guess.
Yeah.
Damn it. I should have just asked for multiple choice here. All right. Well,
But
fine.
Macbeth would have been a very good guess.
Yeah. Anyway, it was one of the two, but okay.
Yes.
Fine.
All right, question 3. The cinematographer of Doctor Strange compared this film to which Disney film due to the visually psychedelic nature?
Disney film. Wow. Okay. Is this Disney animated film?
Yes.
Psychedelic nature. I think the only one that I can think of that is psychedelic in nature is probably Alice in Wonderland.
It's a good guess, but it is not Alice in Wonderland. It is Fantasia. So also a little magical as well.
It is the original Fantasia or Fantasia. I'm assuming it's the original Fantasia he's talking about, right?
Like 1940.
Yeah, that's the original one, not Fantasia 2000. Okay. Wow. Okay. That I would have never guessed Fantasia. Jeez. Okay. All right.
I think the final 2 questions are a bit easier. So
Okay. I hope so. I hope so for my sake.
all right. So a half a point each. Which 2 characters were racially swapped compared to their comic counterparts?
Racially swapped compared to their comic book counterparts. So definitely the ancient one was swapped.
That is one.
Yeah, because she in this one she's Celtic, and then the original she's not.
Also gender swapped.
And gender swapped, yes. What else? I'm gonna guess probably Mordo as well was swapped.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
Whew. One more on the board. We're at 2 now.
and I believe you will be able to get this one as well.
All right, let's see.
All right, the final question. So, with the Eye of Agamotto being revealed as the Time Stone, how many Infinity Stones have been introduced to the MCU at this point?
Have been introduced. Okay. So all right. So the Tesseract hasn't been revealed as the Space Stone yet. So no.
Well, my let me rephrase. Introduced meaning it has been shown in the MCU. So the Tesseract would count.
The Tesseract would count. Okay, well that's helpful to know because I would have not, even with your new your new definition there, I still wouldn't have counted that in my mind because we still haven't seen it as the Space Stone, quote unquote. It's still been inside as a Tesseract, but anyway. So fine, Space Stone, Reality Stone, which is the ether, the Mind Stone in Ultron, now the Time Stone, which is 4, then space, mind, time, mind. There's no, so we have space, reality, time, mind, and then what are the other two? The Power Stone, which we saw in Guardians. I think we've seen 5 of them now at this point. You want this inclusive or exclusive of the
Inclusive.
Time Stone? Inclusive of the Time Stone. I think we've seen 5 out of the 6. Yeah.
It is 5. That's correct. Yeah. I will say, I believe it has been revealed that we have seen the Space Stone inside the Tesseract.
Oh, yeah. In Guardians, they show that, yeah.
Oh, I wasn't even saying, I don't think in Guardians. I think they just showed the stone in Guardians. But I was going to say in Age of Ultron, in Thor's vision.
Oh,
he
that
sees
too,
it
yes.
being shattered. He sees the ether being solidified into the Reality Stone. Because we haven't also seen the ether as the Reality Stone yet.
That's true. We haven't seen the ether as the Reality Stone. Yeah, but I was adding the ether as that based on your description of the Space Stone and the Tesseract and stuff. But yeah, 5 makes total sense. And then we were waiting till basically Infinity War to see the last stone.
Yes.
So.
All right. So you ended with 3 out of 5. Not bad.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll be I can live with that.
Yep. So hopefully it's not too hard for me on our next episode.
Yeah, I mean, what next episode is Guardians, isn't it?
Oh, you're right, Guardians 2.
All right, so that is fully in your wheelhouse. I expect 5 out of 5 there for you.
Yeah, I didn't like Guardians 2 as much as Guardians 1, but
I mean, yeah. You know my thoughts on Guardians 2, but I haven't seen Guardians 2 since it came out, so we'll have to. I don't know. Maybe my tune may have shifted on this time around, but cool. I think now, Chris, we can jump into Act 2.
Yes.
So I will give you the floor again for scenes that stood out to you in Act 2.
I really enjoyed the Caecilius fight. I guess Mads Mikkelsen's character Caecilius. His fight with Steven in the New York Sanctum.
Yeah, that is a good scene.
We finally really get to understand the threat that Caecilius and his zealots pose. We see that they are conjuring weapons from the dark dimension, and they have zero qualms about killing their essentially former colleagues, I guess is how you would, frame their relationship, to the other masters of the mystic arts. But yeah, during that whole fight, you see how outmatched Strange is and how, despite how competent Strange is and how fast he's grown his skills, he is still nowhere near as competent as, even the zealots of Caecilius. So it, again, is another humbling moment for Steven to really show that he may be, progressing quickly in his studies, but he still has a lot to learn.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, him kind of losing the fight, not necessarily full on losing, but he did let Caecilius escape, and, him just struggling with, these mystic arts where Caecilius is literally just bending matter at his will. I thought it was really great visuals in this scene. And again, like I said, really good to see kind of Steven struggling, whereas, you juxtapose that to the beginning in his surgeon career, he is top of the game.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, it is interesting to see. I mean, the first fight in the beginning of the movie and then a little bit later into this act, we get to see, I mean, I think the reason that those fights are so cool with the ancient ones, because you get to see magic being used at nearly its full potential from people that are actually skilled and know what they're doing, versus Steven very much doesn't know. He's just able to sort of use that sort of string move that he does with his fingers.
Yeah.
And that's about it. But yeah, I think it was definitely an interesting fight. I think the whole putting it in the sanctum was also interesting because it confines the space really. So you you're like stuck in these sort of claustrophobic hallways. They have like the sort of fight on the top floor of the sanctum with all of the relics that they have there. And it becomes sort of an informal way to introduce the cloak of levitation as well,
Yes.
which is gives us sort of completes the Doctor Strange look that we have.
Yes.
Which is with the cloak and the blue outfit and stuff. And in this fight is where we get the full sort of Doctor Strange music swell when he lifts up with the cloak and, actually is able to, get a little bit of the upper hand on Caecilius. So
yes,
I agree. This was definitely a really good fight. Well done. And this is one of the few scenes I thought that was actually not few scenes, but in the sanctum is I thought they shot it quite well, like because it's a little bit darker, the warmer color palette. But yeah, I will say, since I brought up the score also earlier, I remember the score being better than it was. And I think this time around, I don't know about you, Chris, but it felt a little bit more in the background. Even though Giacchino does a good job with like the Doctor Strange theme, I would say, it's not used to like a great effect, I think, in this movie. Like it's used very little, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I probably don't have as strong opinions as you do, but I will say this is one of the more memorable themes.
For sure. This
Character
is
themes
definitely a very memorable theme.
Yeah. So to me, that's something that just continues to stand out. I don't think I necessarily think it was as prominent or less prominent. I didn't really catch on to that, but it is a theme that I do recognize versus, maybe some other franchises where I don't really recognize the theme as well because it's just not as memorable.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it is a well-made theme. Like, don't get me wrong. I think it's just, I guess its use in the movie was maybe not as prominent as I remember it being for some reason. But I mean, this is a sequence where the score does pop up, so I think it's well done here, I guess. But yeah, I think to jump into maybe a scene that stood out to me was this is a little bit earlier than the New York fight, but this is when, Strange is still in Comertage and still learning a bit more, but he has the sort of training sequence with Mordo. So, I think the sequence works well for a couple of reasons. Because one is you get more about Caecilius. Like, we keep hearing Caecilius' name. We sort of got we know he's the bad guy, but we don't really know much about him. But this sequence, when Mordo and Strange are fighting, is where we really learn more about Caecilius, that he was a former student, and that he'd come broken and basically lost his way. We also get an intro before the New York sequence about these relics and how they're actually used. So like how Mordo uses the staff of the living tribunal, which I know a lot of folks thought was related to like celestials and stuff, which I don't think it is, honestly, considering we've seen the living tribunal being ginormous and then this staff is like teeny tiny. I don't know how they came up with the name of it. Maybe they just thought it sounded cool. And then, of course, the vaulting boots of Valtor that I think he uses on a regular
really roll
basis.
Off the tongue.
Does really roll off the tongue. But yeah, I think that whole sequence is good. And I think it's also good because you get a sense of Mordo being a pretty formidable fighter on his own. It's, I think, a nice little sequence there between the two of them. You get a sense of Strange and Mordo's relationship. You get a little bit of backstory without it feeling very expository. And you get to just soak in a little bit more of the world. So I think that worked. That scene worked for me. But I'll hand it back to you, Chris. Any other scenes that stood out for you?
Yeah, I'd say a couple. One's a bit smaller, but I think the introduction of Wong, is definitely a highlight for me. Wong has become a fan favorite character over the years, and I think his introduction here is a bit more stoic than what we see later on in the MCU. Kind of like Thor in a way, where their introductions are a bit more traditional to what their characters are in the comics. And as time goes on, the more films they appear in, the more, I'd say, more human-like or more humorous they become.
Yeah.
But yeah, with Wong, I love Wong introduction. Not a huge character, but I think it was really funny. The sort of banter, or I guess one-way banter between Strange and Wong, of Strange trying to humor Wong with different musical artists that go by one name, similar how
Yes.
Wong goes by just Wong.
Yeah.
He
And
brings
then
up
him queening out
Beyonce.
to Beyonce afterwards.
Yes, and then Wong being unamused, but then we see later on he's listening to Single Ladies as
Yes.
Strange is stealing books from the library via the astral plane. I thought it
Mhm.
was really, really funny, given how serious of a character Wong is. But yeah, that's my piece on Wong. I would
For sure.
say. Oh, do you have anything to add to that, or
Yeah, no, I was just going to say I'm glad you brought up Wong because I really liked his introduction in this. I think one, it was a necessary change from the comics that he is not like a butler in here,
yes,
that they
yeah,
give him more agency as like a librarian, someone that seems to be formidable in his own right and obviously very skilled. I guess to the flip side of that, I didn't love that they almost killed him in this movie. I'm glad that they didn't and
I mean
that they
they
reversed
did.
time. Well, they kind of did, but they reversed it. So
Yes, he died, but then yeah, he got
kind
revived.
of. He kind of died, but then he undied. But
Yes, exactly.
yeah, I'm glad that they brought him back because I
Yes,
think yeah, he's. I mean, the joke now, at least in the later phases of Marvel, is that it's become the Wong cinematic universe. That he's sort of the connective tissue that seems to pop up in everything nowadays.
Mm,
Which I don't mind because Benedict Wong always he seems to just be having a fun time playing the
yeah,
role of Wong. So that's great. And yeah, I agree that it's just a great introduction for him, and the whole sequence of his relationship with Strange, I think, is great, and I'm glad we got to see more of that as the MCU goes on.
I
It's
agree.
definitely one of the few shining lights within the MCU, even into the current phases that we're in right now.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I like the Wong stuff in She-Hulk, so
yeah, that honestly was some of the best stuff in She-Hulk. Him and his relationship with Madison.
yeah,
Yeah, great stuff. All right. I think one more thing was so one more thing that I actually want to kind of go back to the New York fight because one thing that stood out to me, which I didn't realize how much I missed it, was the cloak having its own personality, which
yeah,
we don't really get to see again in the later MCU. Like it really seems like there is a little bit of like it has a
uh,
mind of its own. Like when he's trying to like guide Strange to use that little whatever trap to set for
yeah.
Caecilius, he like cleans off Strange's tears. Like I miss that. So, and he also act of his own accord to try and save Strange to like wrap up people and
I mean, we get that personality from the cloak in Infinity War.
kind of we get a little bit of it like when he uses it for Spider-Man and Spider-Man tries to save Spider-Man and like take him away from the fight, and then later on when he wraps around the Thanos's gauntlet to try and stop him from using it. But it seems like it's more at the behest of Strange telling him to do it versus him doing it of his own accord, like he does in this movie. Or I'm saying him for the cloak, but it
It,
doing it of its own
yeah,
accord. But yeah, I think I think that more than any other film, even in I mean, definitely in Strange 2, we do not get any of the cloak's personality. I think you would
I
agree there.
agree. I agree.
But I think this movie more than others demonstrates that personality, and I miss that. And I hope if and when we ever get a Doctor Strange 3, we get a little bit more of that personality back because I do really like that sequence. And it was like just peppered in here and there, but it added little nice moments of levity in the movie.
Yeah, yeah. It's akin to like Aladdin and Aladdin's magic carpet in a
That
way.
I think that is actually a really apt comparison. That's a really good one. Yeah, I completely agree.
Um,
Cool.
yeah, I have like two more things.
Sure.
So, the first one is kind of an extension of Strange's fight, of his
Mm-hmm.
initial fight with Caecilius, but it's with one of Caecilius's zealots, and it's essentially the fight in the astral plane
Yes.
where Christine is trying to save Strange's physical body
Mm-hmm.
while Strange is fighting the zealot in the astral plane over his body in the hospital.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
thought
yeah.
that was a very interesting fight because I don't think we had. I think that might be the only fight in the astral plane that we have seen
Mm-hmm.
in this movie. I'm not sure if we have seen any other astral plane fights in the rest of the MCU,
I
but
don't think that we have. No.
it's a really interesting concept. And just to, again, another moment of humor where we see Dr. West getting, chips from the vending machine, and the astral fight kind of knocks into the vending machine, knocks over multiple chips, and he just circles back to pick up the chips from
Yeah.
the vending machine for free. But something that I was, reading up about when I was, doing my research for this film was that sequence of fighting in the astral plane
Mm-hmm.
was actually like a 12-page script pitch that Scott Derrickson, the director, had pitched to Marvel to, give him the role as director.
Oh
And
wow. Okay.
yeah, so he like sunk a decent amount of his own budget into like, producing storyboards and, whatnot to convey this vision. And, this was the scene specifically. And so Marvel loved it, and they ended up buying those, 12 pages of script off of him once they hired him as director.
Well, you can tell that he really cared about it because I think I'm glad you brought this one up too because I think this is some of the coolest filmmaking in the movie. Like the
Mhm.
fact that the way they cut between the real world and the astral fight, and the way that it's again shot, where it becomes like darker and Strange is fighting with the zealot, I thought was really, really fascinating, and how it actually affects things in the real world where like
Yeah.
the cart moves or like the thing shakes or Christine gets like sort of pulled
Push.
back a
Yeah.
little bit
Yeah.
from the fight. Really, really well done. I thought it was definitely one of the more unique fights within the whole movie. And I think sort of tied to that, which this is sort of related to that sequence, is when Strange is popping out of the astral dimension to like talk to Christine.
Yeah.
I thought that was also an interesting visual. Like it was well done in terms of like the visual effects, I would say. And it just made me, I don't know about you, but it made me think about the Thor Love and Thunder kid, the
Oh,
floating head, and how far we've fallen since then. And
yes.
again, it's not the fault of the visual effects creators here, because like they obviously like they can do good work like this. So they were clearly very rushed with Love and Thunder, but like this is like super well done visual effects, and I want to give them credit for it. But it just that moment was, I just remember thinking about that, being like, oh man, this is funny, just how
Yeah.
different they look now. But yeah, I completely agree with you. The astral realm fight that they had was really interesting. But
I'd say
it
my last one is what wraps up this act.
is the mirror dimension fight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Visually, again, visually stunning with
Mm-hmm.
like, all the buildings shifting, turning, whatever you call it. It is visually just a treat. And, we learn that dark dimension powers are amplified in the mirror
Yeah.
dimension.
Mm-hmm.
And, we finally get to see a rematch essentially of Caecilius now powered up with the dark dimension energy
Yeah.
versus the ancient one. And this is where Mordo basically loses his way, or like really starts to lose his way, where it's confirmed from what Strange was saying that the ancient one draws her power from the dark dimension, and Mordo is just in disbelief, rejects the idea, and then now he sees it for his own eyes, and yeah, just it starts him down his villain origin story path, whatever you want to call it. But I
Yeah.
also thought it was a good fight as well.
No, I thought that this one was a really, again, visually, I think in terms of like the effects, really well done. And this was also like a real big showcase for the visual effects team here. And I think they were nominated for an Oscar here for the visual effects. So I think very well deserved. Like they were doing some really interesting things, like the fractal sort of designs and like the tessellations that were coming out from the visual effects here. And I think here again for me, like even though the visual effects are super well done, the fact that they are outside in New York City, which I know they shot in New York City because there was a lot of like the leaked photos and stuff of them running around in New York. Again, for me, it just felt so gray, and like they, considering some of the other places that they shot were like more interestingly lit. For me, that was a little bit of a detractor from the scene, but not to a huge extent because again, the visual, like the other things that are going on visually, I thought were pretty interesting overall. And yeah, and this is another fight where we get to see, you know, two sorcerers really at full power fighting against one another between the Ancient One and Caecilius. So I thought that that was another really well done fight overall. And yeah, just an interesting sequence, and it's obviously a shame because at the end of this one, she does die.
Yes.
But yeah, I thought that this, and yeah, I think also Mordo's understanding that she is drawing from the dark dimension. I will say, I think part of this whole reveals, the set of reveals at the end with Mordo realizing the that the Ancient One is tied to the dark dimension, and then Strange using then the Time Stone in Act 3. I feel like we don't get a lot of Mordo's reaction, which we could have, like, even like just a minute or two more of just like him reacting negatively to all of this stuff. Like we just sort of get like the one or two lines that like, you know, she's like tampering with natural law, blah, blah, blah. And we don't really understand, I think, why that's bad as much. Like we're just told that it like causes things, but I think it would have been helpful to understand that a bit more, at least from my perspective, especially for, I mean, you and I are very well versed in like the sort of MCU lore and stuff. So I think we kind of understand it. But for, I think the average viewer, like I'm thinking like my mom, for example, I don't think they would really get why that is such a big deal. Like by tampering with natural law, like that's a big deal. And I think they could have explained that a little bit better. And then maybe why Mordo is maybe so hung up on like the tampering with natural law bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
it's a fair point.
Yeah. I think you stole my stuff here. The scenes that stood out to me. I think what I will say, the one other sequence which you probably haven't talked about, and it's sort of tied into like this whole thing about natural law, is when, I mean, this is in this act is when Strange starts using the Eye of Agamotto for the first time.
Yeah.
When he's like sort of trying to learn about what's going on, he actually starts using the time stone a little bit more when he's like looking at some of the book of Cagliostro.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think that one little detail again is, and you see this throughout the movies, I really like that they show Strange's hand still having all of the scars from his surgery. And a nice detail is that they continue showing his scars, I think, throughout the times that he pops up in future movies. So like they show it in Infinity War, they show it in Doctor Strange 2. They don't show it in Thor Ragnarok, but it's because he wore gloves. So I don't think they wanted to put on the whatever prosthetics and stuff that he was wearing on his hands that time, which is a little clever trick. But I like that detail. And then I also like that's him learning about the Eye of Agamotto, when he uses it, is when he sort of learns about the role of sorcerers in the world, is when Wong tells him that they protect against extra dimensional threats, and they learn about the role of the sanctums and stuff. So I think it, again, just sort of speaks to the nature of the world building being really well done here. And they also, I think, explain nicely why like sorcerers weren't necessarily out trying to protect against, you know, the Battle of New York. I mean, we see in Endgame that the Ancient One is sort of fighting them, but like not heavily involved in it. So I like the explanation that they gave, and it worked for me that, you know, they're working more on extra dimensional threats and the Avengers are dealing with like more of the Earth-based threats. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's sort of like that whole sequence of like Eye of Agamotto, Wong and Mordo finding Strange using it. I think that whole sequence also worked well for me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's really it for Act 2, Chris. Anything else that you want to talk about? Or
no, I think we can move on to the cameo.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, part of this sequence at the end in Act Two, when they're in New York, is Stan Lee pops up. So that he's reading, I forget the name of the book, Chris, but it is related to like, more sort of alternative medicine and science and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was like a nice touch. So where do you think that this ranks for you, Chris, like in terms of our tier list?
I honestly put it in a C tier. Like, I don't think
Mm-hmm.
it was necessarily my favorite.
Yeah.
I don't think it was the worst, but I don't think it was anything special.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Chris. I think that this one is very firmly a C tier as well. Nothing really stood out to me. It's like just sort of a nice little. I think it's sort of a nice little nod to what's going on. I think if I remember correctly, I remember reading that this book also talks about like the use of like psilocybin and like other psychoactive chemicals and stuff. So I think that's like a nice little, I guess, touch for those who know, but doesn't really add much, and you don't get a ton of Stan Lee's personality here. So I think that that
Yeah.
was a C tier cameo. So yeah, all right then. I think that was probably our quickest discussion on the Stan Lee cameo yet. Only 2 minutes, but all right, Act Three. I mean, Act Three. I think in typical MCU fashion, there's not much to really talk about here. It's just basically like the Ancient One passing scene, and then the final fight, basically in Hong Kong / the Dark Dimension.
Yes.
So, what do you want to talk about, Chris? Here, what else? Let you kick it off.
I mean, I think we both have the same one, which we could probably save for last. But I would say that in Hong Kong, the
Yeah.
fight, but specifically the use of the time stone in Hong
Yeah.
Kong. So
Mm-hmm.
it was really cool. Again, the cinematography or just the visual effects they have here of when they slow people down and basically pause them in time,
Yeah.
and like having that 3D sort of like almost like I don't know how to describe it, but you know what I mean, like where people are stopped in 3D. It's not like a 2D image in a
Mm-hmm.
sense. And then yeah, being able to see Strange repair things with the time stone by reversing it, I thought was really cool. They revive Wong that
Yeah.
way. And also to see how like everybody moves in reverse, but Caecilius and his zealots are able to use their dark dimension power to kind of pop themselves out of that time stone reverse effect, and
Mm-hmm.
they're able to be in the present with Strange and Wong and Mordo. So
Yeah.
I thought it was a really cool use of the time stone, and I think the time stone is honestly one of the better articulated stones, Infinity Stones, in the MCU in the way that its power is demonstrated. Where I think it's a bit more vague or nebulous the way that some of the other stones are used. Like a lot of them are used for just energy blasts, which is
Mm-hmm.
something like the ether. It kind of made it seem like it was a power stone in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Space stone, like it's same thing. Mind stone, they all use energy blasts. The power stone, is the power stone. I get that, but I think the time stone really cements itself as just a very well, I don't know, well articulated
Yeah. They definitely
stone.
they define it better than I think some of the other ones for sure. But I think it's probably also the stone that has the clearest definition for what it is versus some of the other stones, like
Well, yeah, I mean space stone, like I
Space
guess
Stone
like
and Mind Stone, I
the
guess. But like,
portals.
yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, I agree.
hmm yeah. I think I agree with you. I think that the whole final sequence where we get to see the Time Stone in full effect. It's also cool that they sort of show things just going in reverse for a chunk of it while they're fighting. So I think that that's also just kind of cool filmmaking there overall. Yeah. I think for me, I'm sure we'll talk. I'm sure you had this on your list too, but I don't know. Do you want to save this one till the end, the balcony sequence, or
No, 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 no.
no? Okay.
We could do it
Yeah.
now.
So the balcony sequence for me, I think, was really nice. This is basically what starts off Act Three, where Ancient One is dying, and she has this sort of heartfelt conversation with Strange. which is really sort of her parting wisdom for him, where she talks about how, you know, she sees a lot of potential in Strange and how she's trying to convince Strange basically to like not go back to his old life, to that this he has a higher purpose and that he has a purpose potentially protecting the Earth against multi-dimensional threats. And I think that this whole sequence was really, really night. It was firstly interestingly shot, I would say, like in the nighttime with the snow and stuff like that. But there's a genuine sort of like heartfelt nature to it, which I also really appreciated. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think what was also interesting, which I thought about, is that she talks about how she can't see past this moment into the future. But then I was thinking about in Endgame when she talks to Hulk and she says that Hulk that Strange was supposed to be the best of us. She's somehow clearly seen further into Strange's future. And she sort of hints at it here that she sees that he has possibilities for goodness.
Yeah.
So I thought that that was sort of an interesting switch, but it's maybe that she's talking about how she can't see into her own future.
Yeah,
But she can see into maybe others' futures more.
Yeah,
but
that's how I interpreted that.
yeah, but regardless, I thought this scene was really nicely done, and I do like the fact that she's talking about how she's trying to stretch out one moment into eternity, considering she's been, you know, extending her life for so long. Just a really and also them holding hands at the end. I thought that was really nice, like her just sort of Strange being there for her. So I think that whole sequence was a really nice touch. And going back to what I was talking about with the cloak having a personality, when Strange is kind of sad about it, and he's crying about Christine and, you know, the Ancient One dying. The fact that the cloak wiped his tears is sort of a nice bookend on that moment, I would say.
Yes, and I will say that this scene, this balcony scene, is probably one of my favorite scenes in the MCU. And I will say, I think Tilda Swinton's delivery of her line, "It's not about you," is probably one of my favorite lines or delivery of lines in the entire MCU so far.
Yeah, I totally get that. I think that it's really such a great line, and, you know, speaks to Tilda Swinton just being a great actress. So
yes,
really well done overall. But yeah, any other scenes that stood out for you, Chris?
I think really there's one other scene that really stood out to me, and it's I don't know if you had any other scenes, but
yeah, I mean, it's probably the end with our big bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say the only other scene is bargaining time.
Yeah, I mean, this one is the one that really got memed to high heaven, but for good reason. It is kind of funny, but it's also well done. I think that this sequence in the dark dimension was really, really. It's interesting how you get to see a little bit of Strange's intellect come into play here with Dormammu.
Yes,
and how he uses that against him. But I'll let you talk more because this is your scene that you wanted to talk about, Chris.
Oh no, we can collaborate on the scene because this is again the final fight,
and it's an interesting final fight because it's not really a fight.
Yeah, it's a fight of wills, patience,
will and wisdom, and I guess an intellect almost.
Yeah, but like you said, it got memed out the wazoo, and it's still, you know, it still holds up for me today. But yeah, like you said, Strange knows he's outmatched, but uses his intellect to kind of give Dormammu a taste of his own medicine of this, you know, living in eternity, and Dormammu being stuck in that time loop to the point of just, you know, it just annoys him.
Yeah.
But I do wish we kind of got a sense of how long, you know, all of this time loop lasted for.
Sure, yeah.
I know, like, you know, after the fact, you know, in interviews and whatnot, they revealed like how long it took, and it was like many, 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 many years. But obviously, they don't have the time to show that in the film. But I wish we would have gotten some sort of sense of like really how long, instead of seeing him die like 5 times, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they couldn't obviously. It would get very repetitive if they kept showing it over and over again. But if there was some way, I mean, I think what also makes it tough is that this moment is also frozen in time in the real world. So there's
Yeah.
really no way for them to show the passage of time going on. But I agree. I think that this one, the fact that he does it over and over again, that sort of that could have been hit home better, because I think part of it is, and I think we've discussed this, separately outside of the pod, but the fact that he has been doing this for so long, I think the theory is that this is how Strange basically learns to be a great sorcerer, right? Like just
Yes.
the various ways that he is fighting off Dormammu for years is probably where he learns to be as good a sorcerer as he is. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, this whole sequence was just it's very interesting, and it shows Strange's. It really does speak to Strange being a gifted sorcerer, especially by the end. So I think that, and it ends up working out that he is able to ultimately force Dormammu to come and bargain with him. And I think it's also interesting, which we learned about this after the film came out, was that Dormammu was also voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch, which I thought was interesting. But yeah,
2 roles.
yeah, two roles. Though he kind of has like almost like a Smaug sort of voice here, because Cumberbatch
Yeah.
also did Smaug's voice, but yeah.
Yeah, apparently it was Cumberbatch's voice mixed with another actor's voice for Dormammu, but
Oh, interesting. Okay.
yeah, but straight, Benedict Cumberbatch did provide like the motion capture for Dormammu's face.
Yeah. Which, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't we read somewhere that Dormammu is now going to be played by someone different, or am I hallucinating about that?
I have no idea. I mean, again, I feel like a lot, like we alluded to earlier, there are definitely different characters that just kind of have these plot points planted for them to
Yeah.
appear up in the future, and then the thread just dies off. And I think, like we said, Mordo is one of them where I guess we can talk
Mm-hmm.
about it now, where he basically just goes on a mission to eliminate as many sorcerers as he can because there's
Yeah.
just too many sorcerers. And then, you know, we next time we see him, it's an alternate version of himself. So we don't know what happens with the 616 version of Mordo. And
Yeah.
then same thing with
Exactly.
Dormammu. It's, they introduce him as this big bad, and then Strange defeats him and tells him to like never come back to Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels like a bit wasted in a way, given he's for some reason this huge threat that is a universe or dimension conquering being, and
Yeah.
oh nope, can't come here now. Okay, so I don't know. They should bring him back, but I, I
I
just
agree.
I
I
just don't know
agree. They
how.
should bring him back. I mean, didn't they sort of hint at the dark dimension in the end of Doctor Strange 2 with like Clea and stuff, or was that something different?
No, well, again, I haven't watched Doctor Strange 2 in a while, but you
Yeah.
might be right when she like cuts open like
Mm-hmm.
into the fabric of reality or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see how that plays out. But I agree with you. I think that this movie does have a lot of threads that were left open, and I think the Mordo one is like the one that stands out in my mind. That it is one of the few Infinity Saga post credit scenes that is still unresolved to this day. Like
Yes,
I think the one of the only other ones was the leader from Incredible Hulk, but we're finally going to
we're
see him
finally.
in this month in Brave New World. So this should be interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, we're recording this before we have seen Brave New World, but I don't know. We'll report in on it with probably a mini episode or something. But
Yes.
yeah, I thought it is interesting that they left that thread, and again speaks to the nature of Chiwetel Ejiofor being totally squandered in this movie. I would say, well,
Yes.
not totally,
Yes.
but like pretty majorly squandered.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's really it for Act 3, Chris. I don't think I have anything else. I mean, that those are really the main sequences. Anything else that stood out to you or want to talk about before we wrap up here?
Yeah, no, I think we covered some good ground. I think we could wrap up and then kind of, yeah, give our scores.
Sounds good. All right, Chris. Then yeah, I'll hand it back to you in terms of a score. What are you thinking here?
I would give it like a 3.75.
Okay.
I you know I do enjoy this film, but it doesn't get the 4 stars for me just because it doesn't necessarily have that rewatchability for me that some of the
Mm,
other films may have.
yeah,
Like I mentioned at the beginning, this is a very sort of niche film within the MCU,
for sure.
and it definitely, is a bit more serious in tone compared to some of the others, but at the same time, I don't necessarily feel that real heavy dramatic weight that
Hmm.
a film like Civil War has or Infinity War. And so for me, that's why I don't necessarily give it a 4, but I do think it is a solid film.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I would give this one probably like, I'm between like a 3.25 or a 3.5. I think I'm gonna land at a 3.5 just because I think I agree with you. This one it's really sort of niche is the word you used. I would say it's like very sort of contained, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but I think you're right that it's not super rewatchable. It's like a solid film, which I think speaks to like, you know, again, the MCU at this time, the worst that they were doing was they were making solid films like this, I would say. So, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just like, a good introduction to Doctor Strange, but it's not something that like has so much in it that like it really begs to be rewatched over and over again. Like I
Yes,
think
I
maybe
agree.
like a Civil War where there's like little nuances and like the characters that you can pick up and stuff like that. Like this is I think a pretty sort of straight down the middle, like straightforward character introduction, and once you know them you sort of know them, so there's not really I think more to really dissect as much in this movie.
Yes. Yep.
So yeah, I think for me that it's a respectable film, a good entry in the MCU, but it's very much a setup for bigger and better things for this character and the universe at whole at the
Hmm.
at its in its entirety. So,
Yep.
but yeah, I think that is Doctor Strange in its full. Chris, any other final thoughts here before we close out?
No, let's drive it home.
All right then. Well, that of course has been Doctor Strange. If you liked what you listened to today, please consider giving us a like or subscribing to our podcast. We are, of course, the Ostrich Technique, and we are available wherever you listen to your podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, wherever. We are, if you have any questions or would like to engage with us further in conversation, you can always reach out to us via our email at ostrichtechnique@gmail.com. Yeah, and we will be back with our next episode, which is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Chris. But until then, I've been Ananth,
And I've been Chris.
and we'll see you guys next time. See ya. Bye.
Bye.